right, beloved friends, thank you for your patience. We're just so delighted to see the names coming through on this Monday night. The local spiritual assembly wants to first and foremost welcome every single one of you and all your loved ones to a very special evening, that we would have a community-wide study of the seminal letter of our beloved National Spiritual Assembly that was released on September 30th, 2024, and aptly titled The 9-Year Plan and the Destiny of America. And what a destiny America will have and has been given both by Baha'u'llah, Abdul-Baha, and the beloved guardian. So the evening tonight, if we can have the next slide, we'll just kind of give you an outline of it. We're going to start with a brief devotional program. In that devotional program, we'll have the beautiful prayer for New York City and prayer for America. And then we'll have some welcome and opening remarks. We'll follow up with the study of the 9-year plan and the destiny of America, what our next steps are, and our closing remarks. And it should not be lost to anyone here that the level of love and devotion and appreciation and gratitude of this spiritual assembly has been reared in the hands of Abdul-Baha and is guiding this city of covenant under the auspices of our beloved National Spiritual Assembly that has addressed us in this letter, always remembering that we are under the sheltering shade of Abdul-Baha in the city and under the beloved guidance of our Universal House of Justice. So with that in mind, it is hoped that even though we're online together and we're not in person, that you could still feel the flowing love of the local spiritual assembly to each and every one of you, a deep debt of gratitude for your time and devotion to the work of the cause in the city, and the time that you've placed this evening for us to collectively rise to the hour and have a collective initial study of a letter that will be our guide for the remaining years of the 9-year plan. So with that, we'll start our devotional program and welcome each and every one of you once again.
Bless thou, O King of Kings, the city of New York. Cause the friends there to be kind to one another. Purify their souls and make their hearts to be free and detached. Illumine the world of their consciousness. Bless thou, O King of Kings, the city of New York. Cause the friends there to be kind to one another. Exhilarate their spirits and bestow celestial power and confirmation upon them. Bless thou, O King of Kings, the city of New York. Bless thou, O King of Kings, the city of New York. Bless thou, O King of Kings, the city of New York.
O thou kind Lord, this gathering is turning to thee. These hearts are radiant with thy love. These minds and spirits are exhilarated by the message of thy glad tidings. O God, let this American democracy become glorious in spiritual degrees, even as it has aspired to material degrees, and render this just government victorious. Confirm this revered nation to upraise the standard of the oneness of humanity, to promulgate the most great peace, to become thereby most glorious and praiseworthy among all the nations of the world. O God, this American nation is worthy of thy favors and is deserving of thy mercy. Make it precious and near to thee through thy bounty and bestowal.
Welcome again, dear friends. What a moving, beautiful rendition of that prayer for this special city, for the city of New York. That we hear that beautiful rendition of the prayer that's been gifted by Abdul Baha to us, and also the prayer for America, and how apt at this time, at this juncture of the history of this country, that we have that prayer into our safekeeping so that we can render it as we think about how we make this country work towards this glorious future, irrespective of the tumults and the ebbs and flows of history that it must traverse. Tonight, we have the bounty of having a slight little glimpse at first, but the history of this beautiful country and its relationship with Abdul Baha and with Shoghi Effendi, and how then it has evolved, particularly as it pertains to the city of New York, and then introduce ourselves to the National Spiritual Assembly and go through the letter of the National Spiritual Assembly. Part of that letter, the way this will be done, is that we have a gift from our National Spiritual Assembly to have the audio-visual, and there'll be some sections that we will then stop and have some additional comments. And at the end of it, we'll have some departing comments and prayers and some next steps for the community. As you all, dear friends, know, that Abdul Baha had been given a large scroll of signatures from friends in the United States for him to visit. And he had been a prisoner till not that long prior to this of the Ottoman Empire, and was only freed after the end of the Ottoman Empire. Abdul Baha had put a condition on his coming to the United States, and that condition was that the friends really had to work on, one, firmness of the covenant, and two, the unity that has to exist among the friends. So when those conditions were met, Abdul Baha began on his journey and arrived here in April 11th of 1912. He arrived, came from Alexandria through Milan, and then came all the way up from Europe to here. But on that trip, as we all, some of us may know, or most of us may know, his grandson of 15 years of age, Shoghi Effendi, was with him all the way through to Italy. And through some machinations, unfortunately, of later declared covenant breakers, Shoghi Effendi was deemed to have some sort of a disease, which was not true, and he was barred from joining his grandfather to the journey of this country. So the relationship that we will visit again a little bit more tonight of the beloved guardian, the loving relationship that he had had, is through his pen and also through another personage born in this very city, his wife and his consort, Amatul Bahar Rui Khanum. So you can see how beautiful this story all comes together and how brokenhearted he must have been, but his loving relationship continued through his pen, and certainly how brokenhearted Abdul Baha must have been. Next slide, please. So we all, just for a quick history, we see that little telegram of the way that Abdul Baha was invited here to come to Lake Mohonk for the peace conference, which is about an hour and a half north of here. Next slide, please. And the beautiful history of this city. Here he was at the Kinney's house, and these invitations that were given when Abdul Baha was here at that time. And he spent 85 days, most time in New York City than any other city in North America. So this city, we can just think about the footsteps of Abdul Baha constantly resounding in our minds as we walk the steps, and how much he had loved this city. Next slide, please. And as we know, Abdul Baha also, when he was in this city on June 19th of 1912, when this painting, this actual painting on the right-hand side, was being painted by Juliet Thompson on the left corner, along with Lua Getzinger in the room, declared the city of the covenant, the mystery of this title that no other city in the world has as the city of the covenant. So we bear a great responsibility as we read this letter of the National Spiritual Assembly of our historical heritage. Next slide, please. The first interracial marriage was arranged by Abdul Baha, and it was between Louis Gregory and his wife Louisa Matthews, and it occurred here in New York City on September 27th, 1912. Next slide, please. One of the first race amity conferences was held in this city in 1930, and here's a picture of it and a beautiful little flyer that is inviting the friends to meeting of an interracial amity. And look at some of the friends that are speaking, and one of them is Horace Hawley, who was serving in New York City and on the Spiritual Assembly, and later on the National Spiritual Assembly, the longest serving secretary of the National Spiritual Assembly, and also a hand of the cause. Next slide, please. This is a wonderful picture. The first board of council, so there was no local spiritual assembly until later on in the city, and the assembly was formally incorporated in 1932, but it was formed prior to that. But this is the picture, and the first election was actually in December of 1900. And this was just a board of 9 at that point men, which thank God all of that has changed, to the first photo of the Board of Council, a preamble to the Spiritual Assembly of the City of New York. And this is right here, not that far away from here at Carnegie Building. Next slide, please. This is the Declaration of Trust of the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States, and the bylaws of the local spiritual assembly of the city of New York. This is the bylaws that was adopted by Shoghi Effendi for all the assemblies around the world and all the national spiritual assemblies. Next year in 2025, we'll be celebrating the 100th anniversary of the incorporation of the National Spiritual Assembly in this country. So it's just a beautiful pictorial historical perspective before we go into this letter. Next slide, please. If we look at the Tablets of Divine Plan, friends, the Tablets of Divine Plan, and you can see those cards that were actually sent through postcards at first. In 1916 and 1917, when they were revealed, they were kept under the shine of the Bab for a period of time after it was safe passage to come to the United States. And if you see that picture in the middle, and you see the 10-year-old girl sitting down, that's the unveiling of the Tablets of Divine Plan in this city of New York, in McAlpin Hotel, right here on Fifth Avenue. And you see the picture on the bottom, that's the conference that everybody was at when the first tablets of divine plan were first unveiled, and how befitting that Amatul Baha Ruhi Khanum, at that time 10 years of age, got to unveil the tablets of divine plan in the city that she was born. And imagine what a gift it is for the city that at least housed the future consort of our beloved guardian in this city and guarded her. And she was the one who opened these tablets of divine plan. And when the tablets of divine plan were first read here, Martha Ruth was in New York. And later on, Martha Ruth had arisen, and we all know the history of Martha Ruth and the heroic accomplishments that she's had in our faith. Next slide, please. So some of the wonderful, rich history of the city. Amatul Baha Ruhi Khanum, her mother, Mary Bowles, who's holding Amatul Baha Ruhi Khanum in that picture. We have one of the disciples of Abdul Baha. We have Juliet Thompson. We have Roy Wilhelm. We have Horace Hawley and Boro Kavlin and so many more. And this city also hosted the second Baha'i World Congress in 1992. The first one was in 1963. So what a rich and beautiful history this community has. And hopefully this really gives warmth to all of our hearts before we move in to the study of it. And what an important place New York City has in the execution of the 9-year plan. Next slide, please. So friends, we also, as we note, this is Mary Bowles again, who is the mother of Ruhi Khanum. But not too far from here, there are two wonderful souls, Dr. Florian Krug and his wife, Grace, who later on, he was a surgeon here in the city and became a Baha'i later on. Both of them were invited, and they were with Abdul Baha on the night of his passing in 1921. And Dr. Krug from New York City is the one who had in the sad bounty, but the duty of declaring Abdul Baha that Abdul Baha had passed away that evening because he was staying in the master's house. So all of this wonderful, rich history, the same footsteps of these people here, we are sort of putting our foot in their footsteps and hopefully advancing the cause in their spirit and guided by their inspiration. Next slide, please. Friends, as we said before, the beloved guardian never made it to the United States. But the way he developed his love and relationship with the National Spiritual Assembly was through his pen and his profuse pen. And this letter, The Advent of Divine Justice, that we again referenced in this letter, was written in 1938, December 25th, when he was in Europe, and is addressed really to the North American, to the Canadian and the United States Baha'i. It's a seminal letter of 70-odd pages that hopefully will be another opportunity for us to revisit, given how it really talks about the spiritual destiny of the United States and certainly has set the steps for us forward, which really then inspires the letter that we're going to be reviewing tonight. Next slide. And at last, this is the picture of the first National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States and Canada in 1925. Later on, in 1947, the Baha'is of Canada had their own National Spiritual Assembly. And again, many of these friends, including Roy Wilhelm, Horace Hawley, and a few others were actually from New York City. So this is the rich history. And tonight, we have the bounty and privilege, almost 100 years of the institution of this spiritual assembly, to have the bounty to have one of our own members of the local spiritual assembly who also connects us with her membership on the National Spiritual Assembly, Safira Rameshwar, to be able to now guide us through this letter, give a bit more perspective, and guide us through the rest of it. So with that, I'll hand it off to our dear Safira. And what a bounty and privilege to have our National Spiritual Assembly represented here in person. Safira, thank you again for being here, and thank you for representing our beloved National Spiritual Assembly.
Thank you so much, dear Shaheen. That was such a beautiful recap of the significance of New York City and just the amazing caliber of the individuals who have served in this city. So as Shaheen mentioned, the local spiritual assembly of New York City has actually come together to really study this letter and think about what it means for us in the city of the covenant. And so it has been a bounty for these past couple of months to serve both on our local assembly as well as on the National Assembly. And so I wanted to share a little bit on the part of the National Assembly about the creation of this letter. And so for the framing of these remarks, I feel that we have to realize that, each one of us is part of a very important story. We are all protagonists in probably the most great spiritual enterprise in the history of humanity. The tablets of Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha are laden with expressions of the greatness of this day. And this day is the fulfillment of the promise to every people who've lived in the world, in a world of justice and peace that will be established. And so I wanted to share a little bit with you how this letter came into being. And, as Baha'is, we recognize that in the process of the transformation of the world towards this vision of a peaceful and just age for everybody, there are these two essential features. One is the process of disintegration, which is the gradual crumbling away of the current structures of the world through an often chaotic and catastrophic process. And the other process is the forces of integration, the steady and surely, molding of humanity into a consciousness that humanity is one. So Baha'is are aligning ourselves with the constructive forces of integration. And we have this priceless opportunity characterized by a love for all people, where every individual has the opportunity to contribute to the ever-advancing civilization that Baha'u'llah has envisioned. And so I wanted to quote quickly the Guardian, and he mentions in the advent of divine justice, and I think he summarizes these twin processes very beautifully. And he says, strife and confusion, however bewildering, must never befog their vision. Upheavals, however cataclysmic, must never deflect their course. The present plan must be pursued, relentlessly pursued, whatever may befall them in the future, however distracting the crises that may agitate their country or the world. They should at no time forget that the synchronization of such world-shaking crises with the progressive unfoldment and fruition of their divinely appointed task is itself the work of providence and the purpose of an all-compelling will, a will that directs and controls in its own mysterious way both the fortunes of the faith and the destinies of men. Such simultaneous processes of rise and fall, of integration and disintegration, of order and chaos, with their continuous and reciprocal reactions to each other, are but aspects of a greater plan, one and indivisible, whose author is Baha'u'llah, the theater of whose operations is the entire planet, and whose ultimate objectives are the unity of the human race and the peace of all mankind. So since the early days of the faith in our American society, there has been this deterioration, this polarization, and there continues to be this acceleration of these destructive and fragmenting forces. And so the question in light of this is, how do we understand what is going on in our country? And how do we understand our role as Baha'is to counter that and work for good? So this summer, and this was right before I was elected to serve on the National Assembly, the Universal House of Justice sent one of its own members. So it sent Mr. Paul Lampole to meet with our National Assembly of the United States and all 6 of our continental councillors who reside in the US. And that House member was sent to consult with us about the situation of American society as a whole and the role that the American Baha'is have to play at this particular moment in history. And the reason that he was sent is this sense that the forces of disintegration are gaining momentum, that clearly there is a storm gathering that will be great tests to our people and a great test for the world. And so what this requires for us then is a commensurate energy, commitment, sacrifice to advance the work of the faith. And so this letter, this 30th of September letter from the National Assembly, is the outcome of that consultation with our member of the House of Justice. And it's the desire of the National Assembly to include you all in that conversation with the member of the Universal House of Justice. So in this letter, the National Assembly begins with the statements of Abdu'l-Baha about the destiny of this country and the role of the United States and the American Baha'is, the role that we have been called to play in the establishment of a divine civilization for the world of which Baha'u'llah is the founder. And so not only is there a very significant role for the American Baha'i community to play, there's also a very significant role for the Baha'is who reside in New York City, in the city of the covenant. And as Shaheen has kind of talked us through the significance of this city, the largest city in America, the city of the covenant, we've always played a very significant role in the advancement of the cause in this country, and also the ripple effects of what that sacrifice and that contribution has been to the entire world. This city has always responded immediately and obediently to the plans of the Center of the Faith. And this designation of New York City as the city of the covenant is not just a historical distinction, it's also a spiritual distinction of the special power in New York City that doesn't exist anywhere else. So tonight through these examples that Shaheen has shared of these, very compelling contributions that the members of this city and that the city as a whole, and the significant role that it has played and continued to play in the unfoldment of the divine plans. First with this association to the Master and Abdu'l-Baha, and also because New York City early on was the first significant population of Baha'is in North America and in Europe. It's developed and initiated many facets of local Baha'i community life that would come to be adopted by its sister communities across the entire planet. So Shaheen mentioned the bylaws that have become now bylaws for national assemblies around the world. And the Guardian wrote to members of this city, which actually shocked this city, when he asked the New York Spiritual Assembly to ship copies of those bylaws to national assemblies around the world. And he stated that this city has helped to strengthen the foundation upon which the future Universal House of Justice would be raised. New York City was the first home of the 19-day feast in the West. So really there are so many examples. And the question that we're inviting you to reflect on tonight is, what does this letter from our National Assembly mean for New York City in this moment? What does it mean for each of us personally? How can we respond to action to the requirements of the 9-year plan and the collective plans in this city? So what we're going to do is we're going to have an overview of the letter. So as Shaheen mentioned, we're going to watch certain sections of the audiovisual reading, the audiovisual presentation of the letter of the National Assembly. And we're going to pause at certain sections, and between Shaheen, myself, we've invited Garrison as our auxiliary board member and Ariana as our regional institute coordinator to share a few comments on each of those sections, particularly with the eye of how it relates to us in New York City. So with that, I will turn it over to the beginning of this audiovisual presentation.
September 30, 2024. To the American Baha'i community, beloved friends and coworkers, this is a time of great historical consequence for all humanity. The forces set in motion by the advent of Baha'u'llah, the promised one of all ages, acting both within and outside the community of his avowed followers, are swiftly gaining momentum. Surely, it is not difficult for any of us to discern that a storm is gathering on the horizon, signaling an impending climax that must, sooner or later, revolutionize world affairs. This is a theme that has long permeated the statements of the Universal House of Justice. Its most recent assessment of the current condition of the world came in this year's Rizvan message that, with every passing day, we see too the condition of the world grow more desperate, its divisions more severe. The escalating tensions within societies and between nations affect peoples and places in a myriad ways. To recognize this is to acknowledge the profound moral imperative faced by the peoples of the world, and most especially by the followers of Baha'u'llah. The House of Justice continues. This demands from every conscientious soul a response. We are all too aware that the community of the greatest name cannot expect to be unaffected by the travails of society. Yet, though it is affected by these travails, it is not confused by them. It is saddened by humanity's sufferings, but not paralyzed by them. Heartfelt concern must prompt sustained effort to build communities that offer hope in place of despair, unity in place of conflict. Needless to say, our own country is mired in these same difficulties. Indeed, whatever its material achievements may be, it is clear that American society is still very far from reflecting the spirit and splendor of the teachings of Baha'u'llah. This fact, however, should not in any way diminish our faith in the high destiny ordained by him for this country, nor the indispensable part his followers must play in achieving it.
America to be the standard bearer. In the following passage from the letter known to us as America and the Most Great Peace, Shoghi Effendi recalled some of the many statements of Abdu'l-Baha attesting to the future of the North American continent and the American nation. The continent of America, he announced in a tablet unveiling his divine plan to the believers residing in the northeastern states of the American Republic, is in the eyes of the one true God, the land wherein the splendors of his light shall be revealed, where the mysteries of his faith shall be unveiled, where the righteous will abide and the free assemble. May this American democracy, he himself, while in America, was heard to remark, be the first nation to establish the foundation of international agreement. May it be the first nation to proclaim the unity of mankind. May it be the first to unfurl the standard of the Most Great Peace. The American people are indeed worthy of being the first to build the tabernacle of the Great Peace and proclaim the oneness of mankind. May America become the distributing center of spiritual enlightenment, and all the world receive this heavenly blessing. For America has developed powers and capacities greater and more wonderful than other nations. May the inhabitants of this country become like angels of heaven, with faces turned continually toward God. May all of them become servants of the Omnipotent One. May they rise from their present material attainments to such a height that heavenly illumination may stream from this center to all the peoples of the world. This American nation is equipped and empowered to accomplish that which will adorn the pages of history, to become the envy of the world and be blessed in both the East and the West for the triumph of its people. The American continent gives signs and evidences of very great advancement. Its future is even more promising, for its influence and illumination are far-reaching. It will lead all nations spiritually. And further, there are these wonderful statements about the future victories to be won by the American Baha'is. The range of your future achievements, he once more affirms, still remains undisclosed. I fervently hope that in the near future the whole earth may be stirred and shaken by the results of your achievements. The Almighty, he assures them, will no doubt grant you the help of his grace, will invest you with the tokens of his might, and will endue your souls with the sustaining power of his Holy Spirit. Be not concerned, he admonishes them, with the smallness of your numbers, neither be oppressed by the multitude of an unbelieving world. Exert yourselves, your mission is unspeakably glorious. Should success crown your enterprise, America will assuredly evolve into a center from which waves of spiritual power will emanate, and the throne of the kingdom of God will, in the plenitude of its majesty and glory, be firmly established. In a subsequent letter, published in book form as The Advent of Divine Justice, the Guardian provided further elucidation of these statements and their implications. He made clear that this country was not chosen to play a preponderating role in the birth of the coming New World Order by virtue of any inherent excellence or special merit. Just as Iran had been chosen for the appearance of the twin manifestations of God for this age because of its unrivaled decadence, so too had this country been chosen due to its own lamentable spiritual and social deficiencies. It is precisely by reason of the patent evils which, notwithstanding its other admittedly great characteristics and achievements, an excessive and binding materialism has unfortunately engendered within it, that the author of their faith and the center of his covenant hath singled it out to become the standard bearer of the New World Order, envisaged in their writings. It is by such means as this that Baha'u'llah can best demonstrate to a heedless generation his almighty power to raise up from the very midst of a people immersed in the sea of materialism, a prey to one of the most virulent and long-standing forms of racial prejudice, and notorious for its political corruption, lawlessness, and laxity in moral standards. Men and women who, as time goes by, will increasingly exemplify those essential virtues of self-renunciation, of moral rectitude, of chastity, of indiscriminating fellowship, of holy discipline, and of spiritual insight that will fit them for the preponderating share they will have in calling into being that world order and that world civilization of which their country, no less than the entire human race, stands in desperate need.
A still more superb mission. From such statements as these, it is apparent that the destinies of America and the Baha'is of this country are closely intertwined. Our beloved guardian made clear that our work to transform this country would necessarily evolve over the course of successive stages. For many decades following the revelation by Abdu'l-Baha of the tablets of the divine plan, a primary mission was the spread of the faith to territories and nations around the world. This is not to say that there was no emphasis on teaching on the home front, but the need of the time was to devote significant human and material resources to the international arena. In addition, Shoghi Effendi explained in The Advent of Divine Justice that the American Baha'i community was as yet too small to exert any great impact on the nation as a whole. The emphasis then was to do everything possible to align the Baha'i community itself as closely as possible with the high principles and standards of the faith. Yet, he foresaw a time when, our international mission having been accomplished, another, more glorious mission would await us. And who knows but that when this colossal task has been accomplished, a greater, a still more superb mission, incomparable in its splendor and foreordained for them by Baha'u'llah, may not be thrust upon them. The glories of such a mission are of such dazzling splendor, the circumstances attending it so remote, and the contemporary events with the culmination of which it is so closely knit in such a state of flux, that it would be premature to attempt, at the present time, any accurate delineation of its features. Suffice it to say that out of the turmoil and tribulations of these latter years, opportunities undreamt of will be born, and circumstances unpredictable created that will enable, nay, impel the victorious prosecutors of Abdu'l-Baha's plan to add, through the part they will play in the unrolling of the New World Order, fresh laurels to the crown of their servitude, to the threshold of Baha'u'llah. Dear friends, we cannot, within the limited space of this letter, recount the full range of statements indicating the sacredness and importance of the tasks ahead. nor can we even begin to describe the achievements that have led to this moment, the main features of which are so beautifully conveyed in previous messages of the Universal House of Justice. We can only briefly refer to them as a means of understanding the prospects before us. Two stand out in particular. In its message to the Baha'is of North America on the occasion of the centenary of the revelation by Abdu'l-Baha of the first of the tablets of the Divine Plan, the House of Justice shared that our era of international effort had come to an end and that a new mission now beckons. The tasks confronting you are not identical with those of an earlier age. With the international spread of the faith largely concluded, demands on you are now most pressing on the home front. The process of entry by troops that emerged so tenuously in the 10-year crusade and was fostered in the decades that followed is now being extended through a sound process of community building in center after center in all those countries and territories that Abdu'l-Baha marked out so long ago. Your sister communities, so many of which you helped to establish, are now mature, and you stand with them ready to take on the sterner challenges that lie ahead. The movement of your clusters to the farthest frontiers of learning will usher in the time anticipated by Shoghi Effendi at the start of your collective exertions, when the communities you build will directly combat and eventually eradicate the forces of corruption, of moral laxity, and of ingrained prejudice, eating away at the vitals of society. And in its message to the Baha'is of the world, dated November 28, 2023, we find a new vista opening before us. In the advent of divine justice, Shoghi Effendi explained to the Baha'is of America that given the restricted size of their community and the limited influence it wielded, they must focus, at that time, on its own growth and development as it learned to apply the teachings. He promised, however, that the time would come when they would be called upon to engage their fellow citizens in a process of working for the healing and betterment of their nation. That time has now come. And it has come not only for the Baha'is of America, but for the Baha'is of the world, as the society-building power inherent in the faith is released in ever greater measures.
Advancing within an
So we're just going to pause the reading of the letter here, and I'm going to show you. So for those who receive the printed version of the American Baha'i magazine, there is a pullout of this letter from the National Assembly of the Destiny of America that has the letter in both English and Spanish. It was pointed out earlier on the call, but I wanted to point this out. And not only that, in this version of the American Baha'i, there's a summary of Paul Lampol's talk at the Association for Baha'i Studies conference, the ABS conference that was held in Atlanta this year. And his talk is titled, "The Same as This Past Section, A Still More Superb Mission." And the reason why I wanted to point that out is that Paul Lampol came, it was the same visit. So on his same visit where he came to meet with the National Assembly and the councilors to consult about, the current situation of the US and the role of the American Baha'i community, he then addressed the Baha'is of North America, the friends in the US and the friends also in Canada who are in attendance at the ABS conference, of much of the same things. And so his full talk is on YouTube. I encourage you to take the time to watch it. But in that talk, Mr. Lampol describes very much what is resonant in the sections that we just read in this letter. And he describes that the Baha'i faith offers this unique framework for addressing social issues and building a new world, unlike anything else that is out there at the moment. And I wanted to share a brief example with you of how this has previously happened for us in America. And many of you might have heard the stories of the days of mass teaching. Maybe some of you participated at that time. So you might know that up until the 1960s, the nature of the growth of the faith in America had really been through individual teaching, like firesides. It was slow and steady. People were coming into the faith in ones and twos. So there was a very modest growth rate of people entering the faith. But in a little town called Adams Run in South Carolina, there were 15 to 20 people who came into the faith within just a few days of a series of firesides that the Baha'is had started there. And so back then, the narrative of the Baha'is, they had told themselves that enrolling someone into the faith is a process that takes years. They had to attend a whole series of deepenings. They had to read all of the writings before they could declare and become a Baha'i. But here there were suddenly people who sincerely wanted to join the faith, and they wanted to join quickly. And so this example of Adams Run spread like wildfire across the US, and mass teaching became the name of the game. So from 1968 to 1973, our national Baha'i community in America grew from 16,000 to 68,000, which is more than 400% growth in just 5 years. The average age of those who were coming into the faith at that time was 19 years old. So it was truly a youth movement. And many of the people in the faith in America now are those who came into the faith during those 5 years and their descendants. And so now when you looked at what was happening in the wider world at that time, there was a great deal of turmoil. There was, the Vietnam War was happening. There was the civil rights movement. There was the women's liberation movement. And it produced in young people of that generation, many, many seekers, multitudes were in search of alternatives. And it was a moment in time where there was this convergence of the capacity that Baha'is had developed and the opportunity that Baha'u'llah had produced in the greater plan of God. So today, in our current times, the House of Justice has told us in the Rizvan message and echoed in many, many of its recent messages that we are entering another period of great turbulence in human history. And the receptivity that this will surely generate and our subsequent growth of those who are participating, not just declaring as Baha'is, but those participating in the activities of the faith, might even have the potential to outstrip the growth that the Baha'i community saw in the 60s and 70s, especially now that we have the tools of the Institute. So I'll pause here and we can continue to see some more of this message.
Evolving framework. We need to now understand, embrace, and pursue the work given to us for this stage in our development. That is, to advance our clusters to the farthest frontiers of learning. In this spirit, we offer the following thoughts for your consideration. It is essential that we avoid the frustrations and pitfalls that will inevitably arise from involvement in activities that are not in keeping with the spirit of Baha'u'llah's teachings. However urgent the challenges, we understand that our means must be harmonious with our ends, and we therefore avoid succumbing to the political partisanship, divisiveness, and polarization that increasingly characterize the public sphere. 50 years ago, the Universal House of Justice had this to say about addressing the long-standing suffering of human society. The principal cause of this suffering, which one can witness wherever one turns, is the corruption of human morals and the prevalence of prejudice, suspicion, hatred, untrustworthiness, selfishness, and tyranny among men. It is not merely material well-being that people need. What they desperately need is to know how to live their lives. They need to know who they are, to what purpose they exist, and how they should act towards one another. And once they know the answers to these questions, they need to be helped to gradually apply these answers to everyday behavior. Because of such an attitude, and also because of our refusal to become involved in politics, Baha'is are often accused of holding aloof from the real problems of their fellow men. But when we hear this accusation, let us not forget that those who make it are usually idealistic materialists, to whom material good is the only real good, whereas we know that the working of the material world is merely a reflection of spiritual conditions, and until the spiritual conditions can be changed, there can be no lasting change for the better in material affairs. We should also remember that most people have no clear concept of the sort of world they wish to build, nor how to go about building it. Even those who are concerned to improve conditions are therefore reduced to combating every apparent evil that takes their attention. Willingness to fight against evils, whether in the form of conditions or embodied in evil men, has thus become for most people the touchstone by which they judge a person's moral worth. Baha'is, on the other hand, know the goal they are working towards and know what they must do step by step to attain it. Their whole energy is directed towards the building of the good, a good which has such a positive strength that in the face of it, the multitude of evils which are in essence negative will fade away and be no more. To enter into the quixotic tournament of demolishing one by one the evils in the world is, to a Baha'i, a vain waste of time and effort. His whole life is directed towards proclaiming the message of Baha'u'llah, reviving the spiritual life of his fellow men, uniting them in a divinely created world order. And then, as the order grows in strength and influence, he will see the power of that message transforming the whole human society and progressively solving the problems and removing the injustices which have so long bedeviled the world. Surely this passage is even more relevant today than it was then, especially in the age of social media. The methods and instruments of the plan are now well known to us all, as is the evolving framework in which they operate. This framework encompasses a wide range of activities, distinct yet closely related, for the expansion and consolidation of the Baha'i community, social action, and engagement in the discourses of society. In cluster after cluster, these dimensions must be nurtured in a systematic and coherent manner so that they come to include steadily increasing numbers of people and exert ever greater impact on the life of society. The notion of an evolving framework indicates the importance of learning. No two clusters will advance in precisely the same manner nor at the same pace. Yet all of those that have experienced significant growth have one element in common: the capacity for learning. This capacity is expressed in the ability to understand, in the light of the guidance, the path of growth and development that has brought us to where we are, a realistic assessment of our current reality, and a clear vision of where we now need to go, together with the practical steps needed to get there. To do these things effectively requires an attitude of humility that stems from the realization that all have insights to share, talents to contribute, and experiences to draw upon in our common effort. It requires the frank acknowledgement that we are all striving to gain the capacity to reflect in all aspects of our individual and collective lives the beauty of Baha'u'llah's teachings. We therefore accept the need to learn what is effective and drop what is not. We build on strengths instead of focusing on weaknesses. We refuse to adopt a success-failure mode of thinking and the freneticism that inevitably accompanies it. We avoid the extremes of irresponsible freedom and rigid orthodoxy. We consult with each other in a loving and sincere spirit of search for truth. In sum, we rely on proven experience in applying the teachings to show us the way forward, and all the while, we remain true to the guidance of the House of Justice in illuminating our path. Learning entails not so much a focus on numbers as on the underlying processes of growth. This is not to say that numbers are unimportant. We certainly want the number of activities to grow, but we also want to ensure that they are having the society-building impact envisioned by the House of Justice. This is the only way in which growth can truly be sustained or accelerated. For example, the same few people in a cluster might increase their own efforts from cycle to cycle, yielding an initial increase in core activities. Yet there is a limit to how far that can go unless their efforts serve the more fundamental purpose of assisting others to also become effective protagonists in the transformation of society. If this is not done, then the progress of the faith will inevitably be stifled. Similarly, we certainly want and need an increase in the number of avowed followers of Baha'u'llah. However, if we focus only on enrollments as our measure of success, then we are tempted to forego other essential aspects of the process of community building. Instead, we are learning to welcome larger and larger numbers of people to immediately join us in the work of transforming our communities. As we have often seen, many such people quickly come to recognize the station of Baha'u'llah and readily join the faith. Others, as they become more deeply engaged, will more gradually become attracted to Baha'u'llah and his teachings to the point where, as the House of Justice describes it, they stand at the threshold of embracing the faith. We must learn how to then wisely invite them to cross that threshold as the next natural step in their spiritual path. There can be no doubt that, over time, we will see multitudes of souls taking this journey. While others may not ever formally embrace the cause, all can still serve together with us and share in witnessing the society-building power of the faith manifest itself in ever greater measures. Every space that we create, whether in a children's class, a junior youth group, a devotional gathering, a study circle, or any other, can be considered as an environment in which we are transitioning from the old to the new world order. Each of these, no matter how modestly it may begin, can be seen as a place of spiritual refuge for our fellow citizens. All are distinguished for their spiritual atmosphere, sense of loving inclusion, and spirit of service. As we sustain and multiply them, they will become havens for ever larger populations. By creating such communities dedicated to the application of Baha'u'llah's teachings, we will be pursuing a process of transforming American society that will not falter. A letter written on behalf of Shoghi Effendi asserted, "Until the public sees in the Baha'i community a true pattern in action of something better than it already has, it will not respond to the faith in large numbers. It is this very pattern that we are now laboring to create."
A profound alteration of
Hey, aloha, friends. It's such a pleasure and privilege to be spending this virtual space with you all tonight. And I'm so grateful to our beloved local assembly for convening us to really understand the process by which this really profound message was created, but also to kind of deepen on it collectively. In thinking about maybe what to share tonight, there's so much provided in the National Spiritual Assembly's message and also kind of the references they make to guidance. But I thought I might focus on the portion of this section that talks about the capacity to learn. I think as, I guess, an adopted New Yorker and as the many of us who have, made New York City our home, maybe often experience, our culture is one that really focuses on results, achievement, production, measurable success. And all of these, some of these are very like viable elements of the culture in some ways. And I think we can tap those to some degree in our own community building efforts. But also those elements of the culture can in some ways de-emphasize or kind of sideline what is ultimately a spiritual enterprise. And so for us, in some ways, the best way to kind of avoid that overemphasis on achievement, on the numbers and so forth, is to really focus on this posture of learning, right? So if we're focusing on learning and like asking ourselves continuously, what are we learning? How are we learning? Then these dynamics of success and failure can kind of fall behind, and really it's just about celebrating new insights, new understanding of reality. And then reflecting on where New York City is, there's quite a bit that we have learned as it pertains to the 9-year plan. We can look at the December 30 message as sort of our guidepost and always reference back to it, cycle over cycle, sometimes week over week, depending on where we are in the cycle, to ask ourselves, well, what have we learned? What insight can we glean from what the house has written? And then what do we still need to learn? But if I were to just call out a few areas that I think we see well established in the city that are really critical to this plan, we've seen more than ever before the capacity as a Baha'i community to bring friends of the faith not only into the community building process as participants, but actually help them arise as protagonists. You know, before we started the plan 3 or 4 years ago, you could kind of count the number of friends of the faith who were hosting devotional gatherings or tutoring or animating kind of on one hand. It was really a small population. I think that population now numbers in the tens and maybe even dozens. And so by the end of this plan, that population will need to number in the hundreds, but we're moving forward in the right direction, which is really incredibly exciting. We've learned also to sustain the participation of young people through each phase of the educational process. Not only Baha'is, but also friends of the faith who have grown very close to the faith as a result. So, prior to the start of the plan, they may have been in the children's class program, may have entered the junior spiritual empowerment program, and are now in the institute process and beginning to take acts of service, helping as children's class teachers and animators. And that ability to actually maintain the educational institute is really a special capacity that will only grow on as we move forward into the plan and the series of plans. Ultimately, we've learned to create spaces that are spiritual refuges for members of the wider community that are distinguished by a loving and uplifting atmosphere. Any day of the week, you could walk into part of the city and see these spaces that I think, as NSA so beautifully described, are portals from the old world into the new world. And in a really exciting way, the recent wave of participants in Ruhi Book 12, Unit 2 on family and community is increasing our capacity to have families act as really groups and expanding nuclei and thinking about who are their friends and acquaintances they can bring into the community process and a company to serve. So that's all incredibly exciting. Now, at the top of this section, the NSA reminds us that in this work of advancing the plan, we really are striving to reach the farthest frontiers of learning as clusters. And in the December 30 message, the House of Justice describes in quite a bit of detail what is sort of at the forefront of learning when it comes to the advancement of the cluster. And so we can look to kind of the NSA's point in this message. They say essentially it's welcoming larger and larger numbers of people to immediately join us in the work of transforming our communities. And so I think to the example Safira gave, thinking back to the 60s, in that time, the Baha'i community learned it was a turning point to teach the faith and help people embrace it very quickly. We're learning now to teach the faith and create a vision of Baha'u'llah's what he is destined for humanity, and help people very quickly take that framework for action and begin to apply it in their reality. So there's some really lovely examples. For example, in Columbia University, there's a study circle with some Baha'is and Friends of the Faith looking at Ruhi Book 1, which all of us have studied probably more times than we care to remember. And as is often the case, that Book 1 is started and finished, but in this case, the tutor was very conscious of the need to help the participants achieve the purpose of the book, which was to not only begin the habit of reading the writings every morning and evening, but also to begin sharing prayers with others. And so the tutor really closely accompanied their participants to make plans for forming devotionals. And several of the participants during their study started devotional gatherings as friends of the faith, bringing their own networks together, bringing their friends together. And that's a really exciting capacity that we'll need to learn more and more throughout this plan so that, as mentioned earlier, hundreds begin to serve. Within our neighborhoods and centers of intense activity, much more learning will occur. Learning how to sustain among members of a community vibrant devotional spaces that involve many, that center the arts, groupings of families within neighborhood settings who are organizing community building activities among themselves. And ultimately, beginning to see initial stirrings of social action and contribution to discourse at the local level. Maybe just to finish, I was reminded, the House references the Guardian in so many beautiful places in this message. The quote from the Guardian about the significance of this time, and I think it rings even more true now in New York City in the United States. He says, there is no time to lose. There is no room left for vacillation. Multitudes hunger for the bread of life. The stage is set. The firm and irrevocable promise is given. God's own plan hath been set in motion. It is gathering momentum with every passing day. The powers of heaven and earth mysteriously assist in its execution. Such an opportunity is irreplaceable. Let the doubter arise and himself verify the truth of such assertions. To try, to persevere, is to ensure ultimate and complete victory. All right, thanks, friends.
Thought. Of the three evil tendencies identified by Shoghi Effendi, all of which must be eradicated from the fabric of our society, that of racial prejudice was identified by him as the most vital and challenging issue. We have been the fortunate recipients of abundant guidance from the Universal House of Justice as to how we are to address this challenge within the context of the current series of plans. Most notable is its letter to the Baha'is of the United States, dated July 22, 2020. In this landmark message, we are reminded of Shoghi Effendi's statement that the road to eliminating racism will be long and thorny and beset with pitfalls. We are challenged to consider the demanding implications of the principle of the oneness of humanity for the profound alteration of thought and action required at this time. While acknowledging the insights that many people of goodwill are bringing to the quest for racial justice, we are reminded that we must assess them in the light of the faith's teachings, moving forward in a posture of learning and a spirit of unity. Above all, we are reminded that the issue is essentially moral and spiritual in character. As such, it requires a spiritual remedy. Ultimately, the power to transform the world is affected by love. Love originating from the relationship with the divine. Love ablaze among members of a community. Love extended without restriction to every human being. This divine love, ignited by the Word of God, is disseminated by enkindled souls through intimate conversations that create new susceptibilities in human hearts, open minds to moral persuasion, and loosen the hold of biased norms and social systems so that they can gradually take on a new form in keeping with the requirements of humanity's age of maturity. You are channels for this divine love. Let it flow through you to all who cross your path. Infuse it into every neighborhood and social space in which you move to build capacity to canalize the society-building power of Baha'u'llah's revelation. There can be no rest until the destined outcome is achieved. Beloved friends, we are all aware that the processes leading to world peace necessarily move forward in fits and starts, in alternating modes of crisis and victory. No one can say with certainty how they will play out, nor predict the sequence of events, nor over what span of time they will reach their climax. What we do know is that, however great the trials ahead, the ultimate outcome of a divine civilization is ordained and certain.
The youth must soar.
Thank you. I wanted to say, friends, just a few words about racial justice and progress towards racial unity in New York City. So, from 2 decades after World War I, not only was the New York Baha'i community the largest in the West, it was also the most demographically diverse. And so, of course, we know the stories of Abdul Baha constantly, when he was traveling throughout the US, repeatedly asking for the Baha'is to confront this disease of racial prejudice. Shoghi Effendi, again, continued to admonish the Baha'is of the US to do everything in their power to eradicate what he termed America's most vital and challenging issue. So from its formative period, the New York City Baha'i community has included many Black members, especially from Harlem, from Brooklyn. It's included those of immigrant and diverse backgrounds, which, as we know, was not the norm at the time for people of diverse backgrounds to gather together in such a way. And so with all of these cultural differences mixed in, of course, there are these subtle and not so subtle prejudices. The Baha'i community of New York City really had to work to ensure true unity within the community. It called from the Friends a constant sensitivity, a concerted effort, a vigilance. And not only that, having to kind of navigate the diversity of the New York Baha'i community, the Baha'is of New York have a remarkable history of a contribution towards the broader work of racial justice, impacting the rest of the nation. So Shaheen showed these photographs of the first interracial Baha'i marriage between Louis and Louisa Gregory was here. The Baha'i community hosted these race amity conferences in New York City in those early days. We had a number of Baha'is, including Elaine Locke, Horace Holly, Louis Gregory also, who were very active in the Harlem Renaissance. And so looking back on that history and how prominent racial justice and racial unity was to the Baha'is of this city, we also see today that the Friends in the city have been very involved in initiatives to learn about and work towards racial healing, both within our community and in the broader city. This city is very much alive with the spirit of social justice and racial justice in this modern day. So there's a very particular role that this city and the Baha'is in this city can learn about racial justice, particularly within the process of the Institute. And if we can learn about this, it will not only help and edify the rest of the US, but it will also serve as an example to the entire world of how to use these instruments and methods of the plan to really bring about this transformation and an integration of very, very diverse peoples of all walks of life to create a new society based on these principles of justice, equity, and peace. So I'll pause here and I'll turn back to the video.
We wish now to convey a special message to the younger members of our community. In the advent of divine justice, our beloved Shoghi Effendi addressed these words to the youth of that generation. No greater demonstration can be given to the peoples of both continents of the youthful vitality and the vibrant power animating the life and the institutions of the nascent faith of Baha'u'llah than an intelligent, persistent, and effective participation of the Baha'i youth of every race, nationality, and class in both the teaching and administrative spheres of Baha'i activity. Through such a participation, the critics and enemies of the faith, watching with varying degrees of skepticism and resentment the evolutionary processes of the cause of God and its institutions, could best be convinced of the indubitable truth that such a cause is intensely alive, is sound to its very core, and its destinies in safekeeping. The Universal House of Justice has for decades consistently called upon the youth to make their full and indispensable contribution to the teaching effort. In recent years, it has noted the remarkable capacities and qualities of leadership now emerging among the younger members of the community. For example, in the Rizvan 2021 message to the Baha'is of the world, we find the following. One of the most striking and inspiring features of this 25-year period has been the service rendered by Baha'i youth, who with faith and valor have assumed their rightful place in the forefront of the community's efforts, as teachers of the cause and educators of the young, as mobile tutors and homefront pioneers, as cluster coordinators and members of Baha'i agencies. Youth on 5 continents have arisen to serve their communities with devotion and sacrifice. The maturity they have demonstrated in the discharge of duties upon which depends the advancement of the divine plan is expressive of their spiritual vitality and their commitment to safeguarding humanity's future. Later that same year, the House of Justice, in its December 30 message to the boards of counselors, called attention to the need for youth to support the Institute in particular. They, youth, should seize every opportunity in their schools and universities and in spaces dedicated to work, family, or social interaction. to encourage more and more souls to benefit from the Institute's programs. It is clear from these statements, as well as from the historical record, that the contributions of the youth have always been essential to the progress of the cause of God. Today, the Universal House of Justice has again reminded us of the place they must occupy in the vanguard of service. All must surge, but the youth must soar.
Through
Hello, everyone. Alaupa. And thank you again to the local assembly for organizing this beautiful gathering. I'll just share a few words about how we see the movement of youth within New York City. So we know that as a city, not just as a Baha'i community, but really as a whole city, we're so blessed to be very young in general. There's high schoolers, college students, young professionals in all boroughs coming in and out, bringing their energy and their love and enthusiasm and expertise to New York. And I think a strength that we're seeing emerging in the youth movement in New York City is a sense of mutual support and encouragement that the youth bring in all aspects of their lives. And I think we know that this is a city where we're being pushed to pursue excellence in our academics and in our career. And we're finding that the Baha'i community is creating a culture where youth are also supporting one another to learn what it looks like to pursue a life of service to humanity and to Baha'u'llah, and how that can bring coherence to all aspects of our lives. And we're finding that youth support each other in so many ways through hosting regular gatherings together, devotionals, and that these spaces are becoming havens, not just for Baha'is, but really for many across the city who are connecting through prayer, reflection on the writings, through discussion on pertinent and needed topics, through arts, through movement of different kinds. And we're learning what it looks like to widen the circle more and more, like the message describes, so that classmates, friends, coworkers, neighbors, old contacts, new contacts can all find their role in bringing spiritual and material development to this special city. And that's happening more and more through engagement in the Institute process as a tool for developing quickly capacity to serve, especially for youth, to address the need for spiritual education and empowerment for the younger generations. So there's many weekly study circles, intensive spaces, and through those, we're seeing an emergence of more devotional gatherings, children's classes, junior youth groups. I think we're seeing in the youth of New York that there's so much fitting the description of the National Spiritual Assembly as having spiritual vitality and a commitment to safeguarding humanity's future. And we're in a really exciting time in the city for the youth movement. You'll receive much more information about all of these things, but even just in the coming months, there will be a teaching campaign during the December school break that youth can engage in, a youth conference at the end of January, on January 25th, that will be an opportunity to invite as many friends as we can for them to catch this spark of enthusiasm for service and seeing how Baha'u'llah's teachings can help transform our society. That will be followed then by an Institute intensive at the beginning of February. And then shortly thereafter, the dates are yet to be set, there will be a conference, not just for youth, but for everyone in the city to learn more about the spiritual destiny of America and bring many along. And then in the summer, there's in July a really beautiful summer of service program for the whole region. And there's opportunities for youth to give short and long-term periods of service beyond that. So many wonderful things to come. And there's many ways for the whole community to support the youth. So whether, like myself, you're no longer a youth or you are, we can all play a role in helping the youth soar.
living sacrifice. Let us then address the urgent needs of our generation with renewed determination. Around us, we see a society that is quickly losing its bearings. Trust in the institutions of society, in traditional sources of information and moral guidance, in political and civic leaders, and in each other, is rapidly disappearing. The voices of extremism and opposition are on the rise, while the voices of moderation are drowned out. Yet, with this, we also see an increasing thirst for a vision capable of transcending these divisions, and a source of truth upon which people can anchor their hearts and their efforts. There are most certainly multitudes of well-meaning, high-minded people in this country who sincerely desire to have a just and peaceful society. The fullest realization of their aspirations will appear as they, and our nation as a whole, become imbued with the spirit of the revelation of God for today. What oppression, writes Baha'u'llah, is more grievous than that a soul seeking the truth and wishing to attain unto the knowledge of God should know not where to go for it, and from whom to seek it. Our own spiritual development is far from complete, but further progress now requires us to join hands with many others. We who have access to that truth must now, in a genuine spirit of humility and respect, invite our brothers and sisters throughout this land to learn together how to apply it for our common salvation. With this in mind, the counselors in the National Spiritual Assembly are calling upon the regional Baha'i councils to organize in the coming months a series of conferences patterned after the global conferences that launched the current plan. In addition, they are being asked to organize special gatherings for youth. In the same spirit as the previous gatherings, these will be open to all and intended to widen the circle of those who are involved in the life of the Baha'i community. In all of these, we will, inspired by the themes of this letter, center our thoughts on immediate action in what now needs to be done to fulfill the goals of the 9-year plan. Our task today is no less glorious than that which faced the earliest followers of our faith. Our lives must be characterized by the same degree of consecration and sacrifice that illumined the annals of the heroic age. As Shoghi Effendi stated, the community of the organized promoters of the faith of Baha'u'llah in the American continent, the spiritual descendants of the dawnbreakers of an heroic age who, by their death, proclaimed the birth of that faith, must, in turn, usher in, not by their death, but through living sacrifice, that promised world order, the shell ordained to enshrine that priceless jewel, the world civilization of which the faith itself is the sole begetter. May the devotion, unity, and vigor of our efforts vindicate his highest hopes for us. Be assured of our deepest love and unceasing prayers for each and every one of you. With warmest Baha'i love, National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States.
Beloved friends, thank you for your kind presence and your patience in being here past 9 o'clock. I know we started a little bit later, but what a bounty for all of us to be here tonight, for us to have a brief history of the significance of the City of the Covenant, for us to understand that perhaps as we walk in the steps in this city, we should perhaps close our eyes and think about hearing the sounds of the steps of Abdul Baha and other heroines of the faith in the city, so we can be inspired by him. As we leave this evening, friends, the local spiritual assembly wants to first and foremost warmly thank our auxiliary board member, our cluster institute coordinators, our area teaching committee, and all of our collaborators in the city, and our regional training institute, our regional Baha'i council, for all the services and being also participating this evening. But more importantly, we have work to do. Tonight was not just an event, but a beginning of our coming together as a community to really be inspired by this letter and by our heritage, and to take this city and this 9-year plan beyond the third milestone that's been required by the House of Justice. And what will happen in the next few weeks, that both the auxiliary board member and the assistants and members of the local spiritual assembly will be calling on all of our friends in different 9 units of our feast, in organization with our feast coordinators, our beloved feast coordinators, to begin a series of study, a further deeper level of study of this letter, so that we can imbibe all the teachings in it, we can understand all the wisdom in it, and apply ourselves to the work of the 9-year plan in this city. The eyes of the House of Justice, the eyes of the International Teaching Center, the eyes of our National Spiritual Assembly is longingly looking at us. So friends, with the last section that talked about a living sacrifice, we assembly wanted to leave with this following excerpts from Shoghi Effendi and from Abdul Baha. So it really beseeches your patience for a couple of minutes as we really take in these this pen of Shoghi Effendi. And remember, that's his love language with us, because he was never able to come here. So Shoghi Effendi writes to us. He says, "We don't know what form the immediate future will take anywhere, because the passions of mankind are so unregenerate, and it is so deaf to the voice of Baha'u'llah. No doubt, great suffering will be experienced. What we do know, however, is that we are Baha'is, and that our salvation lies in this God-sent fate. As we give to God, as we serve Him and love Him, so will He vouchsafe to us His mercy, His guidance, and protection. We must at all times put the faith first and our personal desires and comfort second. Having this faith, we have the eternal security and happiness which nothing can take away from us ever. No matter what afflictions may befall the faithless world, the cause of God is our security and confidence in Baha'u'llah, our protection. The champion builders of Baha'u'llah's rising world order must scale nobler heights of heroism as humanity plunges into greater depths of despair, degradation, dissension, distress. Let them forge ahead into the future, serenely confident that the hour of their mightiest exertions and supreme opportunity for their greatest exploits must coincide with the apocalyptic upheaval marking the lowest ebb in mankind's fast declining fortunes. Surely now, if ever, it's time to turn our eyes inwardly, to bestir ourselves, to invoke the most great name, and standing together, summon to our aid and support all the faith, the strength, and the courage that we shall need to meet our pressing obligations and discharge our trust. So, friends, before we depart this evening, on no other words than our beloved Master, whose steps has taken the city by a storm, and whose words call the city of the covenant. These words of Shoghi Effendi tell us that we have nothing to fear, no matter what is going on around us. The country of the United States is moving on towards its destiny. And ours is to make sure that we change the dial of that destiny towards this ultimate glorious spiritual bringing of the unfoldment of the kingdom of God on earth. The local spiritual assembly of the city stands ready. The auxiliary board members stand ready. The assistants stand ready. The area teaching committee stands ready. The cluster institute coordinators stand ready. The regional training institute stand ready, shoulder to shoulder, serenely confident that the hours of our greatest exploit are surely to come in this city. And with that as the call for each of our feasts to study this, it is really beseeched that all of us rise to that occasion, to let the dust of the upheavals of our current times and the confusions that is causing not to make us confused. The world needs, as our beloved auxiliary board member said, they're spiritual refugees. They need a home. They need a place of solace. The Baha'i faith has that solace. So it is ours to think about maybe calling on all those heroes from New York City, perhaps on Ruhi Khanum, perhaps on Louis Gregory, perhaps on Roy Wilhelm, perhaps on all of them who, as Baha'u'llah said, are quivering, waiting in anticipation to rush forth to our aid as we arise to serve His cause. So with that before our prayer, the assembly would like to close with the following verse of Abdul Baha. It is as though Abdul Baha is talking to each of us in the city. So with that, he says, from amongst all mankind had He chosen you, and your eyes have been opened to the light of guidance, and your ears attuned to the music of the company above, and blessed by abounding grace, your hearts and souls have been born into a new life. Thank ye and praise ye God, that the hand of the infinite bestowals has set upon your heads this gem-studded crown, this crown whose lustrous jewels will forever flash and sparkle down the reaches of time. To thank Him for this, make ye a mighty effort and choose for yourselves a noble goal. Through the power of faith, obey ye the teachings of God, and let your actions conform to His laws. So, beloved friends, may we all as a community choose ourselves a noble goal and bring about the advancement of this community to the joy and privilege of our beloved Universal House of Justice. With that, with all the love of the spiritual assembly of the Baha'is of the city of New York, with a prayer for unity, we will close, and in deep anticipation on seeing each and every one of you in these feast units, in the mightiest efforts that we will exert to advance this cause. We bid you our love, we bid you our gratitude, we bid you our grace, and we thank you for every step that you take in the service of this faith that you love so much. So with that, we'll end with our prayer.
Oh my God, oh my God, unite the hearts of thy servants and reveal to them thy great purpose. May they follow thy commandments and abide in thy law. Help them, O God, in their endeavor, and grant them strength to serve thee. O God, leave them not to themselves, but guide their steps by the light of thy knowledge, and cheer their hearts by thy love. Verily, thou art their helper and their Lord.
Thank you for each and every one of you to make the time this evening And we really cannot wait to see all of you very soon.